G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Today we are counting down to number 16 in the top 25 most interesting fantasy basketball players. And we're talking Chris Paul, the oldest member on this list and a player who has found himself in a new team. How well can he do in Golden State? Let's go!
Jordan open. Chicago with the lead. Bryant to Shaq.
Not a game. We talking about practice.
LeBron James with no regard for human life. Irresponsible!
Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang!
Curry for three. Wow! Unbelievable. Making it rain in New York.
We the North are now we the champions.
Not the destination, it's the journey. Mamba out.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And like we said today, guys, number 16, it is the veteran point guard, Chris Paul, finding himself on the Golden State Warriors for this season. And what does that mean for his fantasy basketball output? Chris Paul has been an absolute staple in the top 50, top 40 rankings for fantasy basketball for his entire career. One of the best fantasy basketball players for his career that we've ever seen, to be honest. He is an all-time great, and he is now 38 years old and someone who is in a different situation. So there's a lot of flags, a lot of question marks about how productive he can be. So we are going to discuss it in today's podcast. Before we do, guys, again, if you haven't already, go and check out the ballboysnba.com season guide and get yourself a membership, either a silver membership or a platinum membership, to get access to my top 150 rankings in points and category leagues, my top 250 projections, which gives you access to 8-cat rankings, 9-cat rankings, -1 rankings, ESPN points, Yahoo points, and all of the projected stats for what I believe to be the top 250 players in fantasy basketball this season. And also, you'll get access to my top 250 Dynasty League rankings. And also, when we start the season, we'll be doing some exclusive Q&A podcasts for members over there. So go and check that one out at ballboysnba.com. Let's get into it. Chris Paul. Like we said, he's old. He is 38 years old. I believe, off the top of my head, the second oldest player in the NBA, but only behind LeBron James, his friend. His ADP at the moment here is on Yahoo 72, Fantrax 87.4, and on ESPN 102. Now, they're a little bit all over the place, I think, there. So Fantrax, obviously, valuing him a bit later. ESPN, as usual, sleeping at the wheel. He is a little bit worse when it comes to points leagues, but still, I know ESPN's very dominated by those kind of leagues, but still, last season he played 59 games, he played 32 minutes per game, and in 9-cat rankings he was 35th, -1 ranking he was 40th, and on Yahoo points he was 48th. So comfortably beating all of those ADPs, but are we right to be sliding him down the board that far? Do you think it's gone too far? I think the thing that really it comes down to is, what can Chris Paul do with his assists when he moves over to the Golden State Warriors? Because we know that has been his strength for his entire career. Last season, he averaged 8.9 assists in those 32 minutes. And he's been a pretty staple elite contributor in both that and steals in his career as well. So the thing that I've always been worried about, concerned about with Chris Paul this season is the fit in Golden State Warriors, pairing up with players like Steph Curry and Draymond Green, who both have the ball in their hands, like to play make a lot for their team as well, is different to playing in a system like Phoenix, where you've only really got Devin Booker, who has the ball in his hands as well. So you think about a player like Devin Booker, who averaged, off the top of my head, about 6 assists per game. Let me actually confirm that. Whereas no one else really on that team had, a lot of assists and a lot of time with the ball in their hands as well, compared to at Golden State, where you've got 2 players like that. So last season, Devin Booker averaged 5.5 assists per game. So both Steph Curry and Draymond Green averaged more assists per game than Devin Booker did last season. So I am expecting to see a hit to Chris Paul's assists, which were 8.9 last season. I also think that the minutes could be on his way down. Again, 38 years old. Golden State are typically a team that likes to at least not go crazy with the minutes in their starters. So I think both those things can come down. And I just wonder how well they will gel and fits together. That has obviously remained to be seen. So let's talk about the assists in a little bit more detail. And what I've got here on the screen for those watching on YouTube is you can see the assist averages that Chris Paul has had in the first season in a different team over his last 3 stops. So since the Clippers, after he left the Clippers, he went to the Houston Rockets. Again, played alongside a player like James Harden there. So obviously 2 ball-dominant players. But again, it was just the 2 ball-dominant players. So no one else really got a look in at that squad. But he averaged 7.9 assists. OKC, when he went over there, again, played with 2 players, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Dennis Schroeder in that situation. They had those 3-guard lineups. So 3 guys that made for that team. That's where he saw his assists drop to 6.7 per game. In Phoenix, the first season, again, moving over, playing alongside Devin Booker, 8.9 assists per game. So between those 3 different stops, and I have just taken the first year in each of those situations. OKC, there was only 1 year anyway. So I've taken the first year in that new situation when he's kind of new to the team. In each of the second seasons, both in Phoenix and in Houston, his assists went up the second season as he kind of got more comfortable, but the first season it was lower. So across those 3 stops in those 3 seasons, he averaged 7.8 assists. In the minutes department between those 3 stops, he averaged 31.8, 31.5, and 31.4. So very consistently at that 31.5 minutes, 31.6 if we were to average and round up. That's where he averaged in that season. I don't think that we can expect 31.5 minutes from Chris Paul this season. It is possible. It definitely is possible. But my expectation is more in that 29, 30, 28 to 30, I think is about right for Chris Paul. Just again, obviously those 3 stops, he was several years younger. He did play 32 minutes a game last season, but again, he only played that 59 games last season. Golden State are not the deepest team, so they're going to want to preserve him and have him available for as many games as possible. So, and again, with their history of playing players not low minutes, but definitely not high minutes, I think that he is someone we can expect the minutes to come down. So my projections, I've got him averaging 29 minutes per game. So if we use that average of 7.8 and we scale it down to the 29 minutes that I expect him to play, it brings him closer to 7 assists. 7.2 assists exactly is what I've got him projected for this season. So I do think that he scales. I think he's definitely closer to 7 assists than he will be to 8 assists this season. So that's just where I sort of peg him there. Again, you look at those averages. I don't think he goes quite as low as OKC's 6.7, but that is a real possibility because if we compare those 2 situations, you've got a situation in OKC where you had Schroeder, Shai, and Chris Paul, the 3-guard lineups. In this situation, you've got Steph, Chris Paul, and Draymond. So whilst not 3-guard lineups, but Draymond effectively is that guy that has the ball in his hands sometimes and playmakes for this team sometimes as well. It's a little bit different. He doesn't dribble the ball quite as much. It's very much read and react, pick and roll, and those kind of things. But you still have that decision maker out there in a Draymond Green, similar to the situation that you have in OKC. So I think he's probably closest to that OKC situation in averages for his assists. Maybe a little bit more. Again, I've got 7.2 as my projection. Let me know if you think that that's too low or too high. And again, I don't think we're going to see a vast change in the rest of his stats. The steals, again, fluctuating a little bit depending on how many minutes you get. 1.3, 1.4, I think is reasonable to expect. And then again, he's not going to change what he's been doing the last few seasons in terms of it's going to be a lower scoring situation. Hopefully the threes can stay up a little bit higher. They were very down, not last year, but the year prior. I think he only averaged 1.3 per game, but brought that back up to 1.7. Maybe you can stick around that similar kind of number again. Because obviously Golden State Warriors likes to have their 3-point shots flowing. So where does that leave him in terms of a projection? In my projections, have him in a -1 ranking setting. Around that 70-ish mark, I think is about right for him for the rankings. I think he projects better in a 9 category and an 8 category league. So if you're in a Roto league, I do actually think that Chris Paul is probably being discounted too much compared to his ADP. But in a head-to-head scenario, I think where he's going is probably about right, taking into account a little bit of a discount for his age. There's a bit of downside risk that it completely doesn't work out at all. And you've got a lot of other options around that spot. Like you talk about someone like a Tyus Jones. Like how different is Tyus Jones to Chris Paul really? I think they're probably going to both average a similar assists and steals. Tyus Jones is just a little bit younger. Again, maybe not quite the concrete 30-minute a night, a veteran, going to start and do his thing. He's a little bit less proven, obviously. But I think that you do have some other options when it comes to Chris Paul. And if you are not comfortable taking a 38-year-old point guard at that spot, I could totally understand it. But if we go back to his ADP data here on Yahoo 72, I think that's maybe spot on in terms of my projections. But again, if you take into account the fact he's 38, maybe you'd want to go a little bit later. Fantrax, it's probably starting to get on the late side. So I think at that point, you could really get yourself some good value. And on ESPN, that's just a slam dunk. You get him at 102. You're laughing. Even if it doesn't work out, you drop him and it's not the end of the world. So I think if you can get him closer to that pick 80 mark, pick 75 to pick 80, I think that that's really, really solid. Again, it's really difficult to find those big assists. He's not going to hurt you in the percentages. He won't help you very much in points, blocks. Threes are going to be okay-ish. So if you can take that small hit to the points scenario and get those big assists and steal numbers, I do think that he is someone that in some sites, in some areas, he is sliding into the bit of value. So I think his value ranges a lot depending on who you're drafting with and how much people are worried about older players and things like that. So do keep an eye on him. I don't think he's someone that we rule off our boards completely because I still think, again, it looks like he's going to be starting. It looks like he's going to be playing alongside alongside Steph Curry and Draymond. The recent report came out that Draymond's ankle injury, the Warriors are expecting him to be ready for opening night. So we will probably likely have to have a look at that from the start of the season. So we will see how it all goes. But let me know down in the comment section below, guys, if you're over on YouTube, where do you think you would like to be taking Chris Paul? Are you ruling him out completely? Do you think that he's being a bargain this season and he's never had a outside the top 50 season in his entire career and it's going to continue again this season? Very, very possible, guys. Very, very possible indeed. So that will do it for our number 16 guy, Chris Paul. Number 15 is tomorrow. I'm going to give you guys a hint in a second. But if you haven't already, guys, and you are enjoying all of the fantasy basketball content that I'm producing, I'm working very hard trying to get lots and lots of videos out and podcasts out every day for you guys. So if you haven't already, I would much appreciate it if you go over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. We are on the journey to try and get to 10,000 subscribers. It would be so amazing if you guys could help me. If you haven't already, please go and subscribe as well as hit that big old thumbs up button. But let's talk about number 15, which is tomorrow. We go from one of the oldest players in the list to a player who is very young. And this player that we're going to talk about tomorrow at number 15 is by no means someone who ranked very well at all last season. In fact, he ranked very, very poorly. But that was in category leagues. In a points leagues, he is going to be a top 50, maybe even a top 40 player this season. I think he also is going to make a massive jump in his in this season in category leagues. And I think, again, if we look at the rankings, this player might be underappreciated, but if we look at what he does and the things he can contribute and help your team, especially if you're punting certain categories, I think this player could be a really useful guy for your fantasy team. Let me know down in the comments, guys, who do you think it is? Let me know as well. What are you doing with your fantasy basketball drafts? Are they coming up soon? Do you know what pick you have? Chuck it down in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.